everyone, it's Katrina. Number 10. The Saqqara Papyrus. One of the most incredible discoveries found at Egypt's greatest necropolis was a 52.5-foot-long ancient scrap of papyrus. This huge scroll was uncovered in a sarcophagus deep inside one of the most famous cemeteries on Earth, Saqqara. The papyrus is monumental, with nothing comparable in size or quality being found in over a century. The artifact was made around 50 BC and contains shocking passages and illustrations from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. It was recently put on display at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo for everyone to see. The scroll was discovered inside the casket of a man named Amos. His name is mentioned 260 times in the script and is depicted in many places worshipping Osiris, god of the dead. It's believed the script would have been prepared by priests just before Amos passed away. The priests would have gone through a lot of trouble to add the deceased's name to important places in the text, using excerpts from the Book of the Dead. They also would have needed artists to draw the scenes of Amos worshipping the gods. This was a fairly typical procedure in ancient Egypt. Even near the end of the era we know as Ancient Egypt, which officially fizzled out with the death of Cleopatra in 30 BC, the Book of the Dead was still an important part of dying. Papyrus scrolls were buried with those who could afford to have them. These scrolls contained spells and declarations meant to guide and assist them in the afterlife. The illustrations were also supposed to help their souls journey through the underworld as they met different gods and goddesses on their adventure. And now for number 7. But first, it's shout-out time! I want to say a big thank you to Francis Stephen Peralta and NASA XXS for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about bizarre archaeological discoveries. Number 9. The Sword of the Demon Slayer. Recently, in Nara City, Japanese archaeologists were excavating a newly discovered burial mound. During the excavations, they uncovered what might just be the most exceptional ancient weapon ever recovered from a grave. Researchers found a huge iron sword nearly 8 feet long. This sword was likely a weapon used for slaying demons. It was found alongside a massive bronze mirror so big it could have been used as a shield. Experts say the sword was way too big to be used as a weapon in combat. It was longer than most humans are tall, meaning to wield such a thing would have been almost impossible. The warrior would have had to be 8 feet tall himself and built of solid muscle. Instead of being used in physical combat by some kind of giant, the sword was more of a symbolic totem. It was likely buried with the dead person to protect them against evil spirits. The sword is 1,600 years old and might be the biggest ever found in Japan. Archaeologist Riku Murase from Nara City could barely contain her excitement over the shocking discovery. The sword is known as a Dako sword. Many of these have been found in prehistoric tombs across Japan, but Riku Murase says this iron sword is twice as big as all the other ones. It was almost definitely designed specifically for slaying demons. It may not have been just a totem placed in the burial, but a weapon to transcend the physical realm. Whoever was buried here may have been given the Dako so that they could engage in spiritual warfare in the afterlife. They may have been tasked with slaying demons and ghosts when they crossed over to the other side. Number 8. Long-lost beer recipe. Archaeologists working in southern Iraq recently uncovered the remains of a tavern from 5,000 years ago. This was an old stone building where people living in one of the first cities in the world came to have a drink and a hot bowl of soup. Nobody can say for sure if there were rogues and villains lurking in the dark corners of the ancient pub, or if it was a pit stop for brave adventurers, but it's a cool thought. The researchers came from the University of Pennsylvania in the US and the University of Pisa in Italy. The ruins they uncovered are in the ancient city of Lagash, one of the first urban centers created by the early Sumerian civilization. The Sumerians were the first truly civilized people on the planet, residing in ancient Iraq. Thousands of years ago at this tavern, fish and small animals were on the menu. We know this because a refrigerator was found with hundreds of vessels prepped and ready to serve customers. This was a highly functioning tavern with its own fridge, several benches for people to sit, and a huge oven for cooking food. The scientists even found a long-lost beer recipe. Researcher Holly Pittman says they discovered the beer recipe scrawled on a cuneiform tablet. But as far as we know, nobody has tried to recreate the Sumerian beer yet. Would you try a 5,000-year-old beer recipe? Let me know in the comments. Number 7. The Ring of Sacrifice. 1,000 years ago, a scene so disturbing it's hard to talk about unfolded in Peru. At the pre-Inca site of Pachacamac, archaeologists recently excavated a tomb that contained a ring of sacrificed babies. These babies were buried along with the remains of 70 other people. While we don't know if the infants had been sacrificed on purpose, it certainly looks that way. Researchers don't know what exactly happened here, but it was most certainly gruesome. Many of the adults discovered inside the tomb were either afflicted by disease or had been seriously injured prior to their deaths. The site of Pachacamac is about 18 miles from Lima. It's been under constant excavation since around the 1890s. But this tomb was found in 2012, with the subterranean chambers made largely of mud and brick. Several of the skeletons were mummified and still in their wrappings, while all of the bodies were bound tightly in the fetal position. There were several dogs and guinea pigs sacrificed as well. And then, of course, the babies organized in a ring, like some kind of ritual circle. Most of what we know about the site is that it was used as a place of pilgrimage. This was an extremely important religious site to the people who lived in the region, the Wari and the Chusma tribes. They dominated the area before the Inca annihilated them. The Inca absorbed Pachacamac into their empire, but replaced the principal god with their own god, Viracocha. At the end of the day, we don't know what kind of horrors unfolded here. All archaeologists can say is that it was one of the largest and potentially most violent sacrifices that ever took place in Pachacamac. It may have been an attempt by the locals to stop a drought, or it may have been a ritual to ensure victory in a war. Number 6. Anne d'Allegre's teeth. In 17th century France, social elites lived very similar lives to the social elites of today. For example, they had access to much better dental work than the peasants beneath them. Anne d'Allegre is one such shining example of privilege. In 1988, Anne's skeletal remains were excavated at the Château de Laval in France. She was a French noblewoman with a very bizarre dental prosthetic. When she was first found, archaeologists were confused about her smile. Something strange was happening, but they didn't have the right technology to do any kind of analysis. It wasn't until recently that a team of scientists went back to Anne's remains and checked her teeth again. This time, they were able to identify an old contraption made of gold wire, which was used to keep her teeth from falling out. We know a lot about Anne because of historical records kept of the nobility of her day. She was born a Protestant in the 1500s, was widowed by 21, and died in 1619. She was embalmed in a lead coffin to keep her body as preserved as possible. But before her death, she visited a dentist because she was losing her teeth and her gums kept swelling. The dentist then used thin gold wire to keep her teeth inside her mouth, preventing the whole shape of her face from changing. Number 5. An ancient necropolis. 2,000 years ago, the city of Naples in Italy was a very different place. The district of Sanita was especially different from what it is today, currently occupied by fashionistas, cobbled streets, pizzerias, and mopeds. 2,000 years ago, this neighborhood was situated outside the walls of a Greek city called Neapolis. It was built on a massive hill of soft volcanic rock. This particular volcanic rock, known as tuff, is so malleable that it was used by civilizations in Italy to sculpt tombs for centuries, even before the Romans appeared. The rock was so soft that people could easily carve cave dwellings from it instead of building a house out of mud and brick. 2,000 years ago, Sanita was a necropolis. The streets now, so busy with people on their cell phones, were nothing but raw pathways moving between grand family tombs. This was a city of the dead, only it didn't last very long. Sanita was devastated by a series of natural disasters that buried most of the tombs. Many of the tombs were lost, and only a handful have been found by modern archaeologists. The tombs that have been rediscovered date all the way back to the 4th century BC, originally used by the Romans. What a lot of people who live here don't realize is that every time they walked to the coffee shop, they could be walking over the collapsed tombs of ancient Greeks and forgotten Romans. Number 4. Ancient butter. A man named Jack Conaway was cutting peat at the Emla Bog in Ireland for fuel when he found something both shocking and smelly. 12 feet underneath the surface of the peat bog, he found a chunk of butter. The butter dates back about 2,000 years and is a whopping 22 pounds. And yet it's not the biggest or the oldest. In 2013, another man in Ireland cutting peat found a chunk of butter 5,000 years old and weighing 100 pounds. So why is there so much butter buried in ancient peat bogs? The Cavan County Museum says that in medieval times, butter was a luxury product. Farmers could use butter to pay their rent or their taxes. And because it was such a valuable item, it was occasionally used as an offering. Superstitious locals who believed in spirits and gods offered large chunks of butter to these swampy bogs. These pieces of butter then became preserved because of the high acidity and low oxygen levels of the swamps. Number 3. The Petit Albert. The Petit Albert is a mysterious book of natural magic from the 18th century. It's not clear where exactly the Kabbalistic spells came from, though they may have been inspired by the writings of a German philosopher from the 14th century. His name was Albertus Parvus Lucius, or Albertus of Saxony, the Bishop of Halberstadt in 1366. Although Albertus was a man of science, a mathematician, and a physicist, it wasn't unusual for medieval scientists to dabble in the dark arts. His book, or rather the book allegedly based on his writing, is frequently associated with devil worshippers. It's also associated with a much more disturbing work called The Grand Albert, composed around 1245, and filled with much more sinister magic. The book itself contains strange and extremely vague texts, often written by anonymous or unknown authors. The book became wildly popular when it was rediscovered in France in the 18th century, and still into the 19th century. Even though most of these spells are centuries old, the earliest editions didn't appear until after the invention of the printing press. Because of the book's blend of esoteric and the scientific, the church tolerated its existence for a short time. But as priests became more aware of their church members practicing natural magic and spending more time with the Petit Albert than the Bible, things took a turn for the worse. The book soon became forbidden and was outlawed entirely by 1793. These days, you would have a very difficult time coming across an original publication of the Petit Albert. But if you did, you would find spells on romantic love and seduction, magical ways to improve your agricultural efficiency, clever ways to kill chickens, and how to make soap. Are you interested in reading this forbidden book? Let me know in the comments. Number 2. The Russian Soldier. In 2017, the remains of a dead lieutenant colonel from 19th century Russia was discovered in Turkey. The soldier's grave was dug out of the ground during a construction project in the city of Ardahan. The local provincial director of culture and tourism told news agencies that the skeleton belongs to Karl Karlovich. He was a man who fought with the 78th Navaginsky regiment of the 20th Infantry Division of the 1st Caucasian Army Corps. That was within the Imperial Russian Army. The guy had been dead and stuck in his wooden coffin for 150 years. The skeleton was found still dressed in military finery. Karl was buried with his coat and his shiny military boots. As for what he was doing in a lost grave in Turkey, it all comes down to politics in the 19th century. This part of Turkey was under Russian control. Karl likely served the Imperial Russian Army during the invasion of Turkey in 1877. Then he may have remained stationed at a base in Ardahan once Russian forces took control. The attack on Turkey was part of an offensive against the Ottoman Empire, largely supported by the Eastern Orthodox Church. The coalition was led by the Russian Empire, but included soldiers from Bulgaria, Serbia, Romania, and Montenegro. Number 1. 2,000-year-old ladder. There is a historical spot in an unassuming place in central Bedfordshire, England. It's a field that was visited by humans beginning in the Iron Age and used for beer production in the Roman period. People visited the area in the early Iron Age, then built the first settlement around 100 BC. This is one of the first places people settled in England, living stable lives of animal husbandry and agricultural development. Archaeological digs conducted by the Museum of London Archaeology have discovered all kinds of pieces of the ancient past here. In 2020, they found ancient scraps of tableware and pottery shards from the Romans. It looks like after the settlements of the Iron Age, the place became a Roman farm and potentially a brewery. The most recent excavations revealed a handful of shallow pits, what may have been water wells, and inside of one of them was found a wooden ladder from 2,000 years ago. The discovery was a big deal because most wooden objects don't survive 2,000 years. They decay far too quickly unless preserved inside an oxygen-free environment, which was what happened here. Only about 5% of archaeological sites in England have any surviving wood from 2,000 years ago. Archaeologists are hoping that with this mysterious wooden ladder, they'll be able to learn more about the flora and natural landscape of Iron Age England. Thanks for watching! Which of these shocking ancient discoveries blew your mind the most? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and come back soon for more videos. Bye!